Our speaker was born in August 1950 in Ontario, Canada. In 2000, he won the leadership of Canadian Alliance and became the leader of Canada's official opposition. 2006 was appointed Minister of Public Safety and member of the Cabinet Committee of Planning. Upon his re-election in 2008, was appointed Minister of International Trade and Minister for the Asian Pacific Gateway and Regional Minister for British Columbia, advancing the economic and trade interests for British Columbia. He was also appointed Chair of the Cabinet Committee of Afghanistan. In 2010, he was appointed President of the Treasury Board. He did not seek re-election in 2011. He has received an honorary doctorate of law from Trinity Western University, British Columbia, and an honorary doctorate from St. Petersburg University from Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me His Honor Stockwell Day.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to each one of you who made the bold decision to arise at 4:25 and come up the stairs, because as a speaker, when you're sitting there and the room is empty, you sort of have a few moments of trepidation, wondering, is anybody going to come up to hear me speak? So I appreciate that, and it's been a long day, not in terms of anything you've had to endure, but it has been a long day, and I appreciate this. I will try and have you out of this room by about 7 o'clock tonight, because I know there are other things that you want to attend to. I am very grateful to the Institute for the invitation to come here, and I just want to acknowledge, I'm sure others have already done this, and I've sat and listened to some of the speakers who have acknowledged the work done by the staff, some of whom are volunteer, but all the staff and all the people who put together this. I just want to acknowledge their energy and their strength, and this is a huge endeavor, and they've done so well. And they as each hour goes, they still pretend to be happy to see us. I believe they will be happiest, even happier when we leave. It will be somewhat like my father-in-law used to say about certain relatives that would arrive to stay for a while, and sometimes they would stay too long. And I would ask him after, I said, "How did it go?" He said, "They made me happy twice. They made me happy when they arrived, and they made me happy when they left." So I know, I just say to the staff, we will all be leaving soon, and you will be able to relax somewhat. But thank you for your good work. It is, Berlin is as much as I've been in many parts of Europe, this is my first time to Berlin, and what a fabulous city. It's an understatement to talk about the richness of the history and the culture that is here. Going for a run earlier today and running through some of the landmarks which have become iconic around the world, and to sense and think about the amazing things. How are you? Oh, I thought you were asking me to leave. No. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. By the way, this guy has done a great job the whole time here. It's just been amazing on the sound. Thank you for that. So my wife and I do want to come back here and again and again and take in more of the city. We've only been able to have a small glimpse. Perceptions are amazing, and some people say that we should avoid labels, and yet it's amazing when you tell people in other countries that you're from Canada. There are two things I want to just tell you, two immediate bits of feedback that we invariably get. And it happened, it's happened here, I say with warmth. And yesterday we took one of those tour bus tours, which is a very effective but maybe slightly superficial way to see a particular city. But even when the tour bus driver, who was talking to the different people riding, found out we were from Canada, he said on his microphone, so everybody on the bus, excuse me for a sec. Thank you. Speakers know if you don't do that, they're going to put you the one where you're looking. So, thank you, Evita. I appreciate that. So, on the bus, he announced, "Oh, we have Canadians, eh?" And, I know we say that at the end of many of our sentences. Sometimes we don't realize it. other people, or as people from other countries also say that. When our American friends invariably say that to me every trip I take to the United States, they say, yeah, you Canadians, you always end your sentences with A. And I say to them, yes, that's real interesting, huh? So sometimes we quickly fall into labels. The other one is that Canadians are nice. And we heard that here yesterday, working through the crowd, talking to people, introducing myself. Oh, you're from Canada. Oh, Canadians are so nice. And that's invariably a comment. We are nice. I want you to know that. But there is a reason for that. We are as aggressive as anybody else. We have bad feelings. We tend to want to take out those feelings of frustration and express them. Other countries do it in other ways. There is a way, though, we have a channel in Canada through which we channel all of our aggressive feelings, and it's called hockey. And that's why we are so peaceful. As long as we can engage, either watching or playing that particular sport, all of that is channeled, and because we're able to dissipate that energy, what we have left is just simply niceness. I do want to say that it has been some source of commentary over the last several months, since about September, that Canada has taken some positions internationally which are seen as perhaps a little more hard-edged. Positions which I happen to agree with. These are my former colleagues, so I would agree with them, but I agree with them in principle. But people have asked about that, and I say, well, you have to notice something. These positions that have been a few that have been taken recently since September happen to coincide with the fact that our professional hockey players have been on strike since September. We have no channel now for these feelings. So I would just say, until the strike is settled, do not mess with us. Don't press the niceness. I want to congratulate people for being here, each and every person here, regardless of from whence you've come or your particular age. We're here because we intrinsically believe that through human efforts, the world can become a better place. I hope we are all old enough to be disavowed of the notion that anybody is going to create a perfect world. That is never going to happen, because we are all imperfect human beings. But we can create a better world, and that is what motivates us to take time from the other things we do to be at sessions like this. And in doing that, and in looking at this notion of soft power and hard power, of which there is debate, but generally seen that there is, from time to time, the need for so-called hard power. If there was a choice for how things could be accomplished in terms of improvement in the world or protection of individuals or groups, then soft power would be the preferred way to go. But we do acknowledge, and I just say as an aside, as I say sometimes, as my sons would say growing up, or even talking to groups of students who would say, why do we have to, with good innocence of heart, why do we need armies? Why do we need people walking around with weapons? And why do countries have to construct themselves as such? And we all know that same question, which you can take globally, you apply locally. Why do we need police forces in our neighborhoods, in our communities? And as I would explain to my sons as they were maturing, I would say, you know, right here at home in our neighborhood, we have police officers, and they wear guns. And that is because from time to time there are going to be people who will want to break into the houses of innocent people. There will always be people who want to steal things that don't belong to them. And so as a civilized society, we give certain powers to people to protect us. And then I would broaden that out and to say, in the global village, there will always be those who want to, for wrong reasons obviously, break into other people's countries and steal what they have and hurt and abuse the people who are there. And so, unfortunately, we have to have armies to limit that. Do I think we will ever have a day of perfect peace on the entire planet? Actually, I don't think we will ever have that. Do I think we can have a day and an era of more peace, even than we have now? Yes, absolutely. And that will be accomplished through that combination of, unfortunately, the use of hard power at times for protection, but through cultural diplomacy and the application of soft power, we have great ability to limit those particular chances. These are considerations that sometimes when I talk about our friends to the south in Canada, I'm talking about not just Mexico and Honduras, but also the United States. The great irony for the United States is that they are constantly accused of using hard power. And yet every time there is a dispute, any time in the world, especially if there's violence involved, it is always the United States who's called in to use hard power to help to limit it. And it's a difficult position to be in. But we acknowledge that there is debate on the use of both hard and soft power. And so if we are going to be able to use cultural diplomacy to try and advance this notion of increased harmony and peace, we have to have things in that basket of culture to be diplomatic about when we go to share those things with either leaders, individuals, or groups in other countries. We have heard so many good things in these sessions about what should be in that basket of hopefully attractive items that would cause other people to think about either how they govern or how they are being governed, and then implement things that have proven to bring harmony or to bring heightened standards of living. And I want to just add to, some of these have been talked about to a degree, I want to add to the basket that has already been added to over these last few days by suggesting the 3 items. This does not mean we should be limited to these 3. But 3 for sure that have to be in there. Because if we are going to, through soft diplomacy, not by forcing, but through the power of example, if we are going to suggest to other leaders or countries or individuals that there are some things that can be done that can raise the levels of standard of living, freedom, and appreciation of human rights, we have to know what those are. And we have to be able to speak to them. It can't just be a vague notion of, you know, all we are saying is give peace a chance. That's a beautiful song. But unless we have the elements that build up to that, it can be an exercise in frustration. And the abuses of human rights, even to go to the extreme of what we were hearing about yesterday in many articulate presentations, the gross tragedies of things like genocide. Many of those abuses comes from the absence or the lack of the basic rights that people want, and in those particular situations, individuals or leaders or groups can emerge who can play on that lack of whether it's provision or prosperity or freedom. And it's so important then that we are showing to those parts of the world who don't have those things active in their societies, these things that we have proven to be helpful in ours. We never present from the point of view of our society or country being perfect, because every society, every country has its areas of imperfection and therefore grievance. But we can, I believe, speak confidently to certain broad principles, which, if applied, will lead to certain results. And that's why we have, and I've posed this question, are prosperity or poverty, are they accidents of nature or fate? And can poverty or prosperity be conditions that can actually be altered? And I would submit to you for your consideration and possible discussion and debate that prosperity, and I'm talking about the individual prosperity of citizens or society in a whole, either prosperity or poverty, are a result of certain principles either being applied or not applied. Now, there are obviously some exceptions to that. I don't know what the state of affairs in Berlin is with the lottery industry. In Canada, it's a big deal. And so I can win a lottery and become temporarily prosperous. The record of people who become prosperous that way shows that it's usually not too long before they revert to whatever state they were in before they got the lottery ticket. But you can enjoy temporary prosperity. And as has happened certainly in my life, you can be struck with an external circumstance beyond your control, which can impoverish you at that particular time. I know what it is to lose a business by fire and to be informed that I had no insurance policy when in fact I had. And then to say, what do I do now? So from going to relative prosperity to instant impoverishment is a shocking thing. But it still comes back to what I would propose to you, that by the application or not application of certain principles and we're talking now about economic principles also, you can determine individually or as a society your chance to become more prosperous or impoverished. And so as we look at that question, I would submit to you that there are, in that basket of goods, which we would offer to be culturally diplomatic about to other countries to consider, there should be, at the very least, 3 things added to those which have already been discussed over the last couple of days. The first one being the freedom, 3 freedoms here, the freedom to choose from among ourselves who will govern us. The second one would be freedom of religion. And the third, the freedom to be able to produce and market one's own goods, services, and property. These are all elements of debate and contention, but I just want to say that last one again, the ability to freely produce and market one's own products, services, or property. I'd like to move to the third freedom first and work backwards to the second and the first. History now, economic history, is such that we can look with confidence at areas of the world where these certain principles have been applied. I'm talking now about the freedom to produce, the freedom to market, the freedom to enjoy the hard labors that you go through without being either expropriated or overly taxed. The freedom to do that and those principles being applied can be dramatically illustrated in the great laboratory of planet Earth itself. I'll use 2 examples, there are many more. North Korea, South Korea. One group of people, homogeneous, indigenously the same basic religion, same history for thousands of years, and suddenly an invisible line is put across their land, and to the north they are deprived of using those basic, they have the same starting point about 50 years ago, which is not very much. As a matter of fact, South Korea 50 years ago, as you know, was an economic basket case, one requiring attention and aid. They are now number 8 in the world in terms of being able to give foreign aid to other countries. They rank number 8 in the world. North Korea remains an absolute basket case, utterly deprived of some of the most basic things in life. I had an interesting circumstance take place just a few months ago. I was representing a certain business in South Korea, doing some consulting for them. At the same time, and through none of our planning, my wife was actually in North Korea. She belongs to one of a few agencies in the world that is allowed to go in there. She was there for about a week. And basically, this agency brings in soy product, they manufacture it into milk, and they serve about 60 to 80,000 orphans a day across the country. She was allowed to travel across the country, though there were certain intelligence officers with her and the group she was with. At times, they would reach right into her purse, take her camera, look at what she has taken pictures of, and say, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Day, we have to delete this one, this one, this one." But the utter deprivation was shocking. She's been in many places in the world, has seen poverty and deprivation. But that combined with severe oppression was bordering on horrific. As a matter of fact, with some guilt, one night, they were allowed to phone out one night when they were back in the capital in North Korea at a hotel where there was a landline. They were allowed to make one phone call, as sometimes happens when you're arrested. Not that I would know anything about that. And for reasons I still don't understand, she chose to phone me. And she called me on my cell phone. It was so cold in Korea, South and North. It was a very cold period of time. And she was telling me that she felt so badly for the children, all the orphanages. There was no heat anywhere. Even in the hotel in which she stayed, she slept with a coat on. Now, at that particular moment, I was in the hotel that was designated for me to stay in by the business I was providing some consulting services. And as she's telling me about the cold and how awful it was, I'm looking around my suite and I'm looking at the jacuzzi hot tub and the heated tiles on the floor. And I'm going, "Honey, I'm really sorry to hear that." I didn't have the nerve to describe to her the hotel room I was in. But this This is such a basic case of one government allowing certain principles, market principles, to be applied, and the other not. And then let's bring it closer to home, East Germany, West Germany. I don't even have to go into history and detail on that. But for a significant period of time, one government not allowing those principles, of those market principles, to be applied, and one government allowing them. Same people, same history, same homogeneous factors, same basis of religious experience, and one group of people impoverished and the other relatively prosperous. I will, for a final example of that, I'll come right back to the province in which I served when I was in the federal government, serving the country, but representing a particular area where there are a number of Aboriginal groups that have their own reserve land. And there's a beautiful lake in my constituency, and 45 kilometers apart, there are two Indian bands, two reserves. One practices policies that allow their people to market and to produce and to enjoy the fruits of their labor. The other does not. And the one to the south is much poorer. The people are far less prosperous than the ones to the north. So it doesn't seem to know genetic or cultural distinction. These particular policies, if not applied, will lead to deprivation, which will lead to, in a state of deprivation, that is when leaders have much more tendency to be abusive of those who are deprived, and in fact to cause them to lose some of the most basic human rights. From that one, we go to the second freedom which I mentioned, which is freedom of religion. If when we're sharing through culturally diplomatic processes the things that can make a difference, and I have spoken when I've had trade meetings, and here's where trade can be a factor, because when you're trading product, it gives you an opportunity to trade the ideas which led to the manufacture or the production of that particular product. And so sitting with the top leaders in a particular country that does not allow freedom of religion at all, I would share with them how when you have freedom of religion, you have freedom of expression, you have freedom of association, you have freedom to be criticized. If you don't have that, it will require the use of abusive force to limit or in fact eliminate the religions you don't want. And you become prone to some of the abuses of the most basic human rights. And so we need to, in that basket of offering through cultural diplomacy, encourage others to think about freedom of religion. I was speaking at one of our universities in Canada, this was some time ago, and the students, there was a political Christian group that was doing a presentation, and when they met me on campus, they said, you know, we have a problem here. There's an individual coming there. There's going to be a debate, and what he's putting as the title for the debate is Jesus Christ is a hoax. I said, well, that'll be a good debate. And they said, well, it's terrible that somebody could do that. And I said, whoa, wait a minute here. Are you suggesting that we should bring in a law where somebody would not be allowed to stand up and say another religion is a hoax? That might not be a warm and cuddly kind of a debate, but to limit that would require excessive power and will require the deprivation of people's rights. And so freedom of religion is basic to this basket of goods through which we can culturally, diplomatically offer to others to consider if they don't have it. And of course, the final one being freedom to choose one's own leaders. You might be thinking, why did you say that one for the last? That should be first. Well, look, I am a Democrat. I am fiercely a Democrat. And I have spoken up for democratic and human rights and continue to do so around the world. If you don't have some of the most basic aspects of life in terms of even being able to feed yourself, whether you can vote or not becomes slightly minimal. China has shown, and have nobody leave here saying I'm advocating anything less than full democracy. But way back over 100 years ago, a certain little tiny group of a fishing village was circumscribed. They were not allowed to have democratic rights, but they were allowed to have the right to produce and sell services and have shipping and do all this kind of thing and not be overly taxed and enjoy the rewards of their labor. And it became one of the most stupendous examples of economic growth in modern history. It's called Hong Kong. And recently, over the last 10 to 15 years, the leadership in China sort of caught on to that. I'm being simplistic here on the economic approach, and began to circumscribe little circles on different places on the mainland. And they basically said, okay, everybody inside that area, go crazy, go market, go whatever you want to call it. And there's been the most incredible explosion of economic activity. And we have seen the movement of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people out of severe and abject poverty into relative either low middle income or higher middle income. Is it smooth? No. Is it bumpy? Yes. Do some people get really wealthy? Yeah, they do. Is there corruption? Yes, as there is in any country. But overall, is the standard of life improving? Unquestionably. So these are three areas which I would suggest we need to add to that basket of goods when we are offering culturally, in a culturally diplomatic way, what we believe to be solutions. I close with the notion of where do the arts become involved in this? Well, you just have to go to any of the museums here or in Vienna, where we just were a few days ago, and know that the arts in various forms can inspire people, especially in deprived circumstances. You go back, just one of thousands of examples, 1875, a young man by the name of William Henley, who's been suffering for years from tuberculosis of the bones. So much so that 5 years earlier he had his leg amputated because of the tuberculosis. And he pens a poem. He's a poet. He pens a poem that says he will not allow circumstances to be his fate, but he will learn how to overcome the circumstances. And that poem has become such a source of inspiration that in 1941, Winston Churchill uses it as he speaks to the Parliament in the United Kingdom and says how that particular government, that particular country will not be overrun, will not be a victim of circumstances which appear to be overwhelming. And Martin Luther King in 1953, in his famous radio broadcast, uses that same poem, that artist's expression, to reach out and tell people we cannot be, yes, these things have happened, we cannot be overwhelmed and controlled by our circumstances. We must be the masters of our circumstances. In 1994, Nelson Mandela uses the very same artist's rendition of over 100 years before in reflecting on a poem which then became a movie, and then using sports as a cultural dimension makes that one of the most iconic photos of all time of Nelson Mandela putting on the jersey of the rugby team that overcame incredible circumstances, went on not just to win the world championship, but to unite a country in an amazing way. Thank you for believing, as I do, that we can do things that can alter our condition and make for a better and a more harmonious world. Thank you for being here.